background's a little bit, is it too much, the background?
No, I like it. I like it.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So we start recording, man. David, real pleasure, man. Happy that you took the time to be on the show today. Obviously, we've known each other for a while, so I don't know if we want to go back down like memory lane and talk about Fidel. I guess the first question, maybe a personal one, because I never asked you this: like, how did you get into Krav Maga? How did that become a thing for you?
It was. I used to do martial arts as a kid, so I did it for a while, and then at one point, I was just tired of being like gym training or whatever it was, and I was like, I need to try something a little bit more actiony. So I had a friend of mine say, "Well, come with me to Krav Maga," and then we started doing a bit of it, and I ended up doing it for about a year. So it was fun. It was to say the least. It not only is it challenging, but it's like challenging physically, it's challenging mentally. So and it was like kind of what I do in my day to day, like breaking down problems and like micro decisions to get to a final solution. That's very much how Krav Maga works. But it's also painful because you're not sparring pretending with gear. You have to actually do the actual moves or the actual like defense or the offense to a degree before you break someone's arm, but it's because you need to understand how you're going to do it in real life, kind of thing. So after a year, I was like, okay, I'm getting a little too old for this. It's kind of scary, but it's fun. If anybody has a chance, I recommend it highly to try it out because it really molds your physical and mental to like synchronize. It's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely can relate. I do a little bit of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I find it's like a similar analogy where it's like small problems. I like your analogy to the startup world. I guess my next question would be: is when did you realize you were not going to be an employee somewhere, and you're just going to be starting companies, and that was going to be your thing?
Well, I was never really an employee. I was an employee, I think, once. When I was doing a paper out as a 13-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid. You can say I was technically an employee after university. I worked as a cinematographer. That's my background for about a year in Quebec doing commercials and music videos and short films. And it's not that the industry, I didn't like it. It's just that the industry was very grant oriented and very like you had to fit into a specific mold at the time to get into the right circles. And not to say that it sucked. It's great, but I don't think it was just not in me to like climb that kind of ladder. I wanted to do my own thing. But I guess so as a cinematographer, what you normally do is you take a concept like from a director, and then you obviously have to understand it from a cultural perspective, a psychological perspective, a reference-based perspective. Then you have to look at it from a technical standpoint, budgetary standpoint, human resource standpoint, right? To put it all together, like much like a production designer is in charge of everything that you see except for the actors there, which is the director's job. And then you have the cinematographer where everything else is lighting and the electrical. So all of a sudden someone approached me and said, "Hey, you want to help me build some websites?" And I'm like, I didn't even have a computer really at the time. So I never grew up with one. So I said, okay, sure. I mean, what is this thing all about? Started to understand like, okay, a website, it's kind of like a concept. What do people want to brand? What do people want to message? And then, you have to find developers, you have to find these kind of developers or those kind of developers. You have budget constraints, you have time. And I was like, this is kind of similar to what I was doing. So I got together with one of my cohort, like in university, and we started Fidel, which was a digital studio that would do websites and e-commerces and apps and games and motion graphics. And it was like it's kind of the best of all the worlds, because it was the film world and the storytelling world mixed with the digital world, which was the new trend coming out, right? Like when we started, there wasn't even iPhones at the time. Like the iPhone wasn't even out there. The Facebook wasn't there. So, and then when those things would appear, these new platforms, these new social media platforms, or these new devices, your concept of what you were marketing or building, you had to start thinking at how do you integrate those things into your project as well? How do you leverage those things to get the message across, or whatever it was for branding, etc. So we started to do that. So maybe I wasn't an employee, but I was an employee for all the customers that we had, right? So every customer was my boss, basically. Um, that's kind of how it went. And at one point, one of my customers was Anthony Benda, who I don't know if everyone's familiar with, but he started Cafe Myriad at the time. Now he owns a beautiful coffee shop in Montreal Point St. Charles, or no, it's in St. Henry area called Cordova. But he was the number one barista in Canada, number four in Vienna, around the world, if you can imagine there is such a thing. Um, and he approached me for like a custom app. And he's like, let's build, and this is like 12 years ago. He's like, let's build this point of sale, and so I started to build this thing for him, and lo and behold, it started to become, something that everybody wanted at the time, and then at one point I was like, okay, well, what do I do here? Do I keep servicing different customers who are technically my boss, or do I take this tech stack that I built and we can get into that a little bit later, but do I take this project that I built and try to become commander of my own ship, or whatever analogy you can think of, and that's what I decided to do. Now I don't know if you could say I still work for myself, because now every single customer that we have on board today is still my boss, right? So it's like you're always an employee somewhere, but at least you can decide how you want to get to where you want to get, right? So that's kind of it was always my kind of fascination to try to do something where no one's telling you what to do. You have to decide what you want to do, but be very in tune with what's happening around you, right? In tune of your teams. How are your teams reacting to what you're doing? How is the industry reacting to what you're doing? Separating the idea of what is a trend versus what is an actual change in society or technology or needs. And so, you're an employee of those factors, right? And so I like that more than, given a very specific task, you need to do this by this date, and it's better be done or else, kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, I think so. I like how it's like also there's a this notion of like opportunity, right? So it's like you guys have built something, obviously, and then you had a customer that that hired you guys to build this POS, and then from there you saw the opportunity, like, hey, okay, I'm going to shift gears and kind of like change. It wasn't this master plan of like, hey, we're going to build this POS system.
exactly.
Ended up getting, like in startup parlance, like product market fit. You already knew you had something because you had a customer that enjoyed it, was using it, right? And then
Yeah,
from there, like, hey, maybe I should do something with this because I know there's value. There's a person paying for this. So walk us through that the founding story, right, of Cool Me
sure.
Now, Master Your Rush.
Yeah,
So it's like the early days of how you had the idea, and then you're like, okay, well now, like I'm going to try and build a company and really kind of take it to the next level.
yeah. So okay, yeah. So what happened? So when Anthony Benda approached me and he's like, "Look, I heard you build apps." I'm like, "Yeah, cool. What do you want to build?" He's like, "I want to build a POS," and I'm like, "Fantastic. Just go get one." Right? Like at the time, at that time, 12 years ago, there was Lightspeed Retail, not in the restaurant space. There was Shopify, there was Square, and I was like, "Well, just go get those. They're fantastic, and they are fantastic products, right?" And his words to me were, "They are inadequate, to say in a pretty term." And I was like, that's what got my attention. I was very confused by that statement. I was like, why would you say that about companies that I technically revere? Like, I'm like, these guys have done something massively important. And he said, well, they don't answer to my problem. And I was like, okay, well, what is your problem? He goes, well, I'm a coffee shop. And this is, again, think about it, this is 12 years ago, before limited service restaurants really existed, right? There were fast food restaurants and there were chains. And that was kind of that's what you were gravitating around. And then the third wave coffee shops came out. And the third wave coffee shops is like, look, we're making 90% of our sales in a 2-hour window. So just because we're busy doesn't mean that we're actually making money, right? Like he had it down to a science where he's like, from the door to my cash register, if it takes more than 4 minutes, I'm losing 50% of every person behind the person at the door. And I don't even see it. And so, like, what is one person walking away? I mean, that's take a croissant, take a cappuccino, you're like $10, right? Maybe, okay, 12 years ago, maybe it was $8, but that's still a lot of money. And you don't even see that loss. And then what happens on top of that? You start getting those customers start building muscle memory. Oh, this place is always busy. I don't have time for this. Let's go somewhere else. So I was like, okay, I get it. That's interesting. And I'm like, well, what is it you want? He goes, well, look at McDonald's. He goes, look at Starbucks. He goes, I want what they have as a system. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. I'm like, that's true. They're not using full service restaurant point of sales. They're using bespoke systems that they had to build from the ground up to answer to their workflow, right? And so their workflow, it's all about volume. When you're looking at a full service restaurant at the time, and even today, a full service restaurant can't do volume. They have a certain limited number of tables. They can only flip them a certain number of times. So it's all about upselling. So the tools for the workflow that are designed for a full service restaurant inherently think about different problems than what is now limited service. And what is limited service? You pay before you eat, right? Like that's the fundamental difference. You place in your order and you pay before you eat. So when we built this for Cafe Myriad, I mean, this was a beta. This wasn't even a beta. This was like, I'm sending you an Apple file, put it in iTunes, connect to your iPad, synchronize, bugs like crazy, getting things built just for him. But what happened is all of a sudden this wave of third wave coffee shops started. Sam James Coffee Hour from Toronto. He was a friend of Anthony Benda's. He called, he said, I want your platform. I'm like, it's just an app for him. It's like, it's not cloud-based even. It's like, there's just an online admin panel. So we were duplicating code, and lo and behold, we got to like about 30 to 40 customers that were like, well, how much do you want for it? I went, I don't know, X dollars, and it's yours forever. So we have a little group of legacy customers now in our cloud-based software that is just your legacy. Like you're the OGs, so you're always going to have access with us, right? And so what happened from there is that as the industry started to shift, so people were like, well, coffee shops are doing this, right? They're busy. Well, I could make tacos really quickly, or burritos or salads at the time. And we even got involved with a big salad brand out in Montreal. And it started to go well at the beginning, but their growth, I mean, we were in a company back then still. We were still just a tech stack. And so our growth simply didn't match with theirs. It really didn't work out because the pressure of their growth and their needs, we just couldn't keep up fast enough. So at a certain point, the decision was like, okay, I mean, we went our separate ways, and it's no hard feelings. That's what it is. It's like we were not ready for their growth. Now we would be. Now we actually technically, we're not outgrown them, but we've outgrown what even their needs are, right? And with customers we can talk about afterwards. But at a certain point, we have to make a decision. We're like, okay, look, we're sitting on about 75 customers. What do we do? Do we kill the tech stack and then kill all these, not kill the customers, but put them into a trouble? Sorry, no more point of sale. Or do we decide, okay, let's inject into this thing with the partners that I brought in, and let's build this so that we can actually start to scale it. Not scale it to the scalability that we're now doing while we're raising. We talk about also that later, but scaling it so that it can stand on its own 2 feet. Now, what's really good though, is that the motivation was that if we went into the point of sale space just by saying we want to build a point of sale right now, like as it's today, forget it. It's too late. Because we organically grew a tech stack into the new largest segment of like restaurants, right? And forget just what happened with COVID and the pandemics and the lockdowns, but real estate prices increasing, minimum wage is increasing. We inherently, naturally just grew into this vertical. Our tech stack evolved with their needs, rather than having a lot of problem with tech companies in general, and a lot of SaaS-based companies in general that I've seen over the years, is they build something and then they try to shove it down the throats of that industry. When you have an industry telling you what they need in order for them to be able to grow, this is a winning formula, right? And that's a story. It's like it was built based on needs of someone in the industry, merged with someone from a tech world like myself, and then grew organically into something today that just fits with which is the new term. And so that's why we're seeing such an uptake into what we're doing, especially with what happened last year with the lockdowns and everything. We actually started to skyrocket rather than having to slow down, right?
Yeah.
Because this is the new industry, this is the new reality. But it's funny enough, it started 13 years ago with somebody saying, I just have a problem, which is how do I take more orders,
Yeah.
right?
I
So
love yeah. I love how it's like, when customers are basically knocking at your door saying, we want this as a product, you're like, I'm not sure. I think that's always a good sign to start.
yeah, 100%,
Um,
100%,
and I want to go
100%.
back to the question of focus, right? So the cafe idea, or like this obviously this fast service restaurant aspect. I like the distinction you told me about how it's like before you pay or after you pay, right? Like a light speed retail, let's say classic restaurant or other services. You guys are focused really when people are paying before they eat, right? So it's this notion
Exactly.
of quick service, really, really, really fast, and this notion of really being focused on that segment. I guess the question I would imagine investors, other people are asking, where it's like, it seems like POS systems, there's like a million of them. It's a crowded space. How do you address that point?
Yeah, so exactly. So it all comes down to, everyone says a crowded space, and then so I always mention to them. I say, I tell them a quick anecdote. I went to the Chicago restaurant show 2 years ago, before when we could still travel and stuff. And I was mind blown. I was in this space that makes like it's as big as the Javits Center or maybe bigger. And there's this technological wing where all the point of sales were there. We were too small, so we didn't have a booth. We still don't have a booth there. We're still small, but getting there. But we're going down this technological hall, and it's just all POS companies for restaurant. So like Lightspeed and Toast and Touch Bistro and NCR, Micros, like Aloha, they're all there. They're all lined up next to each other, and they all have smiles on their faces. All the sales reps. No one's like hiding themselves. I'm like, this is not a crowded space. This is a competitive space, right? And it's not even that competitive in the regards of it depends who you're competing for. Because I mean, look at the fundamentals of any business. I try to always look at the root cause of something. The root cause of the restaurant industry is general population is increasing. People got to eat. I mean, that's just what it is. So, and people are working longer hours or working remotely. Now, they need access to quick options. People are not taking 2-hour lunches anymore. They're taking shorter and shorter lunches. There's this plethora of new concepts coming up every day. There's more franchise shows than there's ever been. There's more and more restaurants popping up every day. Again, QSRs, like limited service. There's it's all it right now. What it comes down to, it's a question of how do you focus your product offering into a segment. How do you do that successfully? You have to have been built from the ground up to think like they think, right? Like if what I mean by when I talk about pay before you eat in volume, the question is when you're a full service restaurant point of sale, you're looking at how do I bring the tools for the restaurant to manage all of their bottom line to ensure that they can maximize profits. That's naturally the workflow. I mean, the waiter doesn't come to your table and punch in the order on the iPad in front of you. You order, you sit down. Would you like a cocktail? Would you like to have an appetizer before, entree if you're in the States? Like, what do you want before? And then they'll go and they'll punch it in, maybe even at the end of this thing, at the end of the night. What's required when you're dealing with LSR is how do I get the order into my system as quickly as possible? We're talking about not just taking the order. So how many touch points do I need to have on a cash register to punch in an order? How can I relay the order to multiple kitchen stations if needed? Example is such as a McDonald's, from a fry station to a drink station to a burger station, right? To a drive-through station, to whatever stations. How do I relay that information so it all comes out at the same time as quickly as possible so I can dispatch it out and give it to the customer? Now let's go further than that. Like example in a full service restaurant. They won't ever deal with kitchen displays of that. They'll have one screen. They won't split up the screens. Why? Because it's the chef that is calling the shots when to cook something to get it out at the same time. You order a chicken salad, I order a steak, some orders the fish. They all have to come out at the same time. So it's not convenient to split it up into stations on screens. But when you're doing a LSR or QSR, you're thinking about any order that someone can make, it's going to come out in an average 5 minutes to 7 minutes. So it can all go at the same time, kind of, and then it just gets packaged up at dispatch. The proof is, look at new McDonald's. You don't even talk to anyone technically anymore. You order and then you go and you wait for your order to come out at a completely different area of the restaurant. This is where it's all going. But now let's go further. How do I integrate all the delivery platforms? All of this plethora of Uber Eats orders and DoorDash orders and Grubhub orders and Skip the Dishes in Canada. All these orders are coming in. So now these orders are coming in. I have a cashier that's trying to talk to the person in the lineup, but these orders still have to be accepted and punched into the POS so they can get sent to the kitchen. But the person's still in front of me trying to make an order. These are the problems that full service restaurants don't deal with. So inherently, their tech stacks have never been built for that. But now let's go further than that. Okay, so that's great. You have this tech stack that works for maximum volume of orders at a location. But now let's go even further. What happens the inherent progression of a limited service restaurant, like a quick service restaurant, is once my formula is correct, I want to replicate. I want to build as many as I can, wherever I can, which means that I need to hire staff that is untrained to immediately know how to use the system intuitively without training as quickly as possible. I need something that's lightweight. If I have a food truck versus a place in a food court versus a place that's on the street, at a festival, I'm going to have inherently different setup needs. I need a system that I can on the fly do that. Now, on top of that, I need multi-location management. Then if you go down the road, what happens with an LSR once it becomes multi-location? It becomes a franchise. Once it becomes a franchise, then you need corporate level tools to manage all your franchisees and ensure the franchise. A full service restaurant doesn't have these problems, right? Once you build, the Keg did it phenomenally well, but if you're I don't know, let's just take Queue de Cheval, which is famous in Montreal, you're not going to open a second one. It's very rare that you're going to open a second one. You want to focus on this one and make it a gem. So you're not. So the providers of the technological solutions for that one location don't engineer themselves to think like a franchise would. Does that? I mean, I'm trying. It makes sense. Like an analogy would be
different. Yeah, it seems like a completely different customer segment, and it also seems like, just based on your growth. Maybe we'll talk about your growth in a second, but it seems like you're moving from building a product now to like commercializing, growing, and scaling. So I guess two-part question would be is like, can you give us a sense of current scale of Monsieur Rush, growth rate, high level numbers you can share? And then second, how are you growing? Like, what's the best, like, how have you figured out the way to attract new customers, franchises, restaurants to your product?
So our growth we've been growing 2x. We've officially incorporated 5 years ago, and we really started to like push and invest capital 3 years ago. So we've been growing 2x ever since. We have already reached, by the end of Q2 this year, we already reached our top line revenue for the entire last year. So even amongst the pandemic and everything, which is great. It works for us. We're very sticky because we solved the inherent problem of being able to master someone's rush, right? And no pun intended, but it's what we're doing. Like, we're able to increase top line revenue. We're able to decrease the time it takes to deliver orders with actual like calculated metrics, because we're inherently building it with restaurateurs that are telling us what their problems are. And so rather than build, like I said earlier, rather than build features that we think they're going to want, we're building features that they tell us they're going to need. So, and why do we do that? It's because it's not the SMBs telling us anymore. We're now in multi-location. We're in a sweet spot now where our average deal size is 4 locations to 40 locations, and some more. Like, we have Mr. Pretzels across Canada. They're at 85 locations. We have Bustan that converted all of their locations from 3 different POSs to ours to consolidate at a corporate level franchise all the way down to franchisee. They're at 40 locations now, expanding into Ontario as well, which is phenomenal for them. We're now converting La Belle Province, if you can imagine, which is a staple in Quebec. But they're in a disaster zone in terms of organization because every franchisee is technically independent. They don't have to do anything. They're trying to consolidate them because they're realizing the royalty calculation in real time is very important, and knowing what's happening in the space. So our growth has been really good in terms of obviously by those results. But what's more important is that our churn is so low. Our gross churn, which includes temporary closures because of the pandemic, includes seasonal, which is like ice cream shops, right? They're going to close for 6 months, reopen. Our gross churn for this year so far is at 6.4%. Our net churn, meaning we don't like you anymore, or you're not giving us the tools we need, or we changed concepts, or we're going back to what we had, is at 1.4%. And this is not monthly. This is annual numbers. Okay, so in general, we have a very sticky product. And why is that? Because once you get into a multi-location, you technically become, if you're in an SMB, they can swap you out from one to another. I mean, it's not that difficult. Okay, it takes a day to retrain, etc. But once you get involved into a multi-location, and the more locations, and then eventually a franchise, and not chains, we're not even thinking about chains. That's a whole different world. We inherently become a CRM, right? I mean, you're central, you're ground zero. For you, for the investment, the time, resources, money needed to implement us into a multi-location or a franchise, you really have to be bad at what you do for them to consider throwing you out. Because they'll call you and say, okay, listen, we need this feature. What do we do to do that? Okay, we're expanding to another 5 locations. We guarantee that they're yours, whatever it may be. They're gonna talk to you first. They're not just gonna get rid of you, and that's a fundamental difference. The other difference is our system is self-explanatory. When I say that, we have 3 steps to training our customers. We have a 45-minute back office training before they're even installed to know how to build their menu, collect reports, all that good stuff. We then have a follow-up call, and this is all done by Google Hangouts, by the way, sometimes even on the phone. Some reps, like myself, if I have to talk to someone, I'll just do it by my phone because I know the system inside out. But we'll do a 30-minute training for front of house. This is how you're going to punch in orders. This is how you're going to relay them to the kitchen, all that stuff. This is what you're going to do if your network goes down, etc. And then we have 5-minute follow-ups for every additional, we call them premium features. How do I do an Uber Eats integration with you guys? Oh, how do I do a QuickBooks integration with you guys? 5-minute call. Oh, this is how it works, and it's done. These are things that allow us to have this growth. And now what we're dealing with is our SMB sales cycle has been 14 days. Last year, we're down to about 7. We can go as far as 1 day sales cycle. Like people call us, demo, immediately sign up, and then we'll fulfill them. And so now what we're starting to do is we're starting to focus on franchises. And franchises, we now know what the sales cycle is with a franchise. It's first, what are the needs? Are you a fit? Can we get a pilot going so that they can test and see what happens at the franchisee level? Is a franchisee happy? And then while we do that, we start drafting an LOI. Once we have our LOI, we can then go, do we have to do custom development or a certain rollout schedule? So there's multiple ways that we're doing that. One, our SMBs are mostly coming from PPC, as you know. Your past was an expert in that. So, SEO, SEM, that's the standard stuff. We have a huge division in partnerships. Partnerships is key. We can talk about that a little bit later, but partnerships specifically with food distributors, with payment providers, Canada and the United States. And then franchises, as weird as this sounds, it's been word of mouth and just showing up at franchise shows and just coming up to them and being like, let's not even have a booth, just be like, you're a franchise that wants to expand. Your goal is to sell to franchisees, to people that are considering you as a franchisee. What are you doing with your technology to guarantee them that they have the best technology to make the most sales, and then you are by that reaction guaranteed to make the most royalties. And usually the answer is, well, we don't know yet. I mean, we're thinking about NCR, we're thinking about micros, but those are really damn expensive, and we're like, yeah. So, like, would you like a new technology? Would you like a new vision? And that's how we kind of do it.
And are there any innovations on the business model front? Like, is it like curious to hear as like how you think about how you charge your customers?
Everything's a la carte. Everything is modular. So we can have different packages, but one thing that we also do, as an example, we whatever features we build, we start to look at those features as individual components. So some restaurants may need the feature, like one location may need it, one location may not. So it's very versatile for that, and that's what franchisees love. The other thing is the features that we build, we are starting to look at those features as standalone products. So now our service offering is not just a POS with features, but simply a standalone feature. An example of that. We're one of the only point of sales in North America that has direct two-way integrations with all of the largest third-party delivery apps. Everyone else is passing through aggregators. There are different. It's a Checkmate, a Chowly, a Kubo, I believe, Deliverect. I'm sure people have seen the raise that they did. These are standalone products that allow integration. Well, we have those integrations too. So we also have a product that now can compete, right? So these are the kind of things that we think about. Because we built everything modular, we can either bundle it together, right? Or we can separate them and sell them as individual pieces. And that gives a much more flexible, business model, especially in terms of revenues, because we can be making revenues in multiple different ways.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like there's lock in, but you're also giving customers what they need in essence of like you said, a la carte, picking and choosing. I want to zoom out maybe a little bit, David, and talk about like the market and like how big you see the opportunity. Obviously, you guys are focused on North America, but curious in terms of your ambitions, like considering you have something that definitely has fit that's creating value. How big do you think you could take this company?
It's a good question. I think that especially with our current raise that we're doing, one of the biggest components that we will be bringing in is an enterprise-based CTO, because I think that historically, if you look at what's happened in the industry for franchises in general, uh, NCR and Micros are fantastic products. They're enterprise, they're heavy, but the word heavy means heavy, right? And they had, especially NCR, I know this for a fact, speaking with sales reps at the Chicago show, restaurant show, they had their own cloud-based point of sale for franchises, but they had to put it on the shelf because their entire reseller network was not interested in selling a SaaS-based solution. Their networks were interested in selling $7,000 cash register installs, right? $40,000 per location, because that's where the money is. There is a clear pathway for us to become a rival, not saying as big, maybe one day, but clearly to become an option for franchises that are not chains yet, right? Chains is when you're going into becoming like McDonald's, Wendy's, like you're owning either the real estate or you're owning, you're building the building and then you're leasing it out, or like really controlling your franchisees. Then you're building bespoke and you're sitting on, let's say, NCR's hardware, but you have your own OS. But there is a clear opportunity for a cloud-based solution that is hyper-focused on what franchises require, simultaneously at the franchisee level, then at the franchisor level, right? Simultaneously, which in itself becomes, if you want in quotation marks, an enterprise light, right? So a solution that really starts to 360 all of that. There is no other player really that we've seen so far in North America that is there. Not to say that there's not going to be competition eventually.
Yeah. Of
But
course,
that's
yeah.
where we see ourselves. We see ourselves becoming one of the leaders because we're doing such a great job at it. Not to pat ourselves on the back, the you know what we tell franchisees or potential franchises to do: speak to our customers. Like, just call them. Don't even talk to us. Just talk to them, and they'll tell you why why they went with us. Not even if they're satisfied with us now, but why they actually went with us. Like, an example of that is Wayback Burgers from the States. So I think it's 250 locations. They crossed into Canada, so obviously different corporation. Wayback Burgers Canada. They're in the States sitting on NCR. So obviously their inclination was, okay, well, might as well go with NCR in Canada. Yeah, but we don't know if it's really going to work out. That's a very heavy investment for a franchisee. I don't know if we want to do that. Okay, let's look at the other options out there. We were one of the POSs that they contacted, comparing us to the likes of NCR, and we won the business. So it wasn't solely on price. Because I mean, at that point, if it was price, they wouldn't even have looked at NCR, right? They would have just been like, okay, we're going for the cheapest solution out there. That's not what they were doing. They were comparing us to NCR, and they were looking at what is it that's happening now amidst COVID, amidst the pandemic, amidst not the trends, but the actual market shifts in general in this space. We won that business, so we're doing something right. So like you said, how big can we go? We want to become one of the leaders, one of the forefront companies that sits and helps franchises grow and scale to the size that they want to be.
I love the vision. I love the chutzpah, David. Clearly, I'm biased, as you know. I'd be remiss if I don't ask you about the other kind of like big POS player in this market. So, like, I think you had mentioned Lightspeed before. So, just curious to hear your thoughts. They were obviously like recently in the news, like not for good reasons, but it's just curious to hear your thoughts about the company and like just considering it's at least in my view the gorilla in the Quebec market.
Yeah, a little Canadian market. I would even say Canadian market. In the States, it's
Oh
now.
yeah, sorry, I meant
Yeah.
as a company like based here,
Oh
not.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, I actually know the founder. Phenomenal human being, like great guy. Like, I mean, everyone's seen what he's built and in the motivation, everything. His Lightspeed retail product. I mean, like I said very early on, it was an awe awakening moment for me when I saw like technology on a cloud and the way he built it with reseller. And then he got his great partner GP that it came in and took everything in house, and they built their own, like, I don't want to say boiler room, but their own outbound, their own infrastructure. I mean, it's a machine. It's a well-oiled machine. Um, their vision as to where they're going, it's very courageous because I mean they're fundamentally trying to become a PayFac now, right? They're leaving their product, they're leaving their POS, so they're not even a POS company anymore. I mean, they have a product, yes, but I mean they're buying out everybody else. They bought Upserve and Shopkeep and Vend. They're buying doors. I mean, they bought the companies in Germany and companies in Australia. They're buying doors. To what end? They fundamentally want to become a PayFac. I mean, look, that is a behemoth of an idea because you're going up against, if you're going to become one of those guys, you're going up against Chase and Moneris or First Data, Fiserv. Like, you're going up against these PayFacs that are massive, like, and been around for much longer. So by buying doors, at what point does one have to ask, will they start eroding themselves? Will they start to create the wrong, confusing message? Unless it's all going to be brought under one umbrella of a brand to see, right? And I think that what's happening to them now is you have companies that are trying to short them, right? I mean, once you go public, you're at the mercy of people that want to short you or people that want to love you, right? I mean, it's you're at the mercy of that. So how deep does that go? I think it would be interesting to see public information about churn, public information about inbound closing rates. I think it would be interesting to see like true numbers. Not to say that they don't have true numbers, but we haven't seen them recently. I'd love to see Lightspeed defend the hell out of itself because you know what? Eventually, when we build ourselves, we can join the Lightspeed family, maybe, right? But that's kind of like that's kind of the approach. And if I can continue on that, but then you got guys like Toast. So you have Lightspeed that's being like, shorted or pushed around right now, or questioned. But then you got guys like Toast that are, 20 billion market cap in one day. Like it's so volatile. It's so strange. And I think that in the end, who's going to win in this space, especially in the restaurant space, is the ones that are going to be able to answer to the simplest problem a restaurateur has, which is, I just want it to work and I want someone to pick up the phone when I call. This is like, if you can do that, you're naturally going to progress with them as they grow. If you can do that from the very beginning. And also, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to leave it off, David. Right, like you say, core value proposition: you grow with your customer and be there for them. And yeah, good thoughts on Lightspeed. And obviously, I think I'm a little biased. I think they're going to more than just pull through, this recent little situation.
I agree.
Maybe closing question for you, David. People can learn. How do they want to learn more about Master Your Rush? Get in touch. What's the best way?
Well, MYR.io would just give you a good sense of what we're doing and the different features and all that. Definitely just reach out to me. You can either write to info@MYR.io or David@MYR.io. If there's investors listening, we're raising currently a Series A. So we've already sent out to a bunch of people. We have great metrics. We have great model for next year. We have a great investor. Yourself is one of them, but we have Lester Fernandez, from a CFO from Pivotal Payments, who actually sits on the board with me. He invested at an early stage with us. He sees the potential of where we're going. So if anyone's interested, please reach out. If anyone wants to know more or argue with me, then even better.
Awesome, man. Awesome, man. Best of luck with the raise, David. I really appreciate your time, man. This is great.
Thank you so much, man. I'll talk to you soon.